Hello and welcome to Jill Cameron Creations. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. Today we are making a card for Make the Cards Challenge. It's a sketch challenge and we are using Stampin' Up! Products. Hey, we are going to be making a card for Make the Cards Challenge today, and I'm going to be using some products by Stampin' Up! Obviously. And I wanted to kind of show you my creative process that I go through sometimes, especially if I'm a little stumped. We have a card sketch, and it's linked in the blog and also in the description below if you're watching the video, obviously. And I go through sometimes, you know, those periods where I'm just kind of like, I don't know what in the world I'm going to make. I wanted to make a slimline card. I had the Stampin' die set here that I hadn't used yet, so I really wanted to use it. And I was like, well, it's not Valentine's Day, but I really wanted to bring some love and joy into the world with a beautiful, soft love card. That's just what I had on my brain, so that's what I'm going to do. So when I make cards and I get stuck, I will sketch them out. I have this big, huge book here that I've sketched lots of cards in, and I keep this handy so I can go back and look through them too. And I make notes about what colors I'm going to use, and I just draw it out. I have a template that I keep for card sizes. So I know I have a slimline card here and just a regular A2 size card. And then I have a wide format for my, for a wider, slimline card. Because I do have some stamps and stuff that work with a wider slimline cards. I just sat down and sketched some stuff out and see what works and what doesn't work. And I mark some colors on here that I'm going to use, and the different papers and that kind of thing. So if I go back to it, I can still have it and be able to replicate this card a little bit. And I don't worry too much about whether I'm going outside the lines or anything like that. It's just a rough sketch to give me an idea of what it's going to look like. And I do die cut some things. I do punch some things out so that I can get that really good idea of how it's going to look in the end. And this is just scrap paper. This is like that. I went to the big box store and picked up some inexpensive paper when they run it on sale for next to nothing. And that's what this is. And I bought a whole bunch of it years ago, and I'm still using it. So that's what that is. Well, let's take a look at what we're actually going to be using today for our stamps and dies. Okay, so some of this is the Forever and Always bundle set. The foiled papers, we're going to be using that. And the colors that this comes in is Sahara Sand, Rococo Rose, and Blushing Bride. And so I'm going to stick with that color palette 100% completely because it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to be adding some white in with that as our card base. And then also some very vanilla. I have some cardstock over here already cut down and trimmed out. I have a slimline card base. This measures 3 3/4 by 8.5. If you're wondering how to quickly cut this down, from an 8.5 sheet of cardstock, just chop off 3.5 inches off the end of it. That's it. Done and done. We're going to punch these out. We're just going to punch some hearts out of this gold foil cardstock, and I'm going to show you those punches in just a second. We're going to be using the Always dies, and because it has the outline for the word always, so we're going to be using that. We're going to create our own background, as you saw, using some of the text from this, and of course, love and love you always. I'm actually going to build that instead of just always. I'm going to build love you always for the sentiment on the front of the card. And then you can barely see it on that other one, but there is this absolutely awesome border that we're going to put on the card as well to add a little bit of something to it. The heart punches that we're going to use the one that has the scallops on it. And then we're going to use the plain heart one. And we're going to build our card. I'm also going to be doing our sentiments. Our love and always are going to be in liquid platinum. This is Ranger embossing powder in liquid platinum. So I'll be using some VERSAMARK ink Don't forget to snag an anti-static powder tool. Super important to get clean embossed images. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to create our background here, and the Stamparatus allows me to create a very even pattern all the way up my background panel, especially with sentiment stamps. You can do this with border stamps or any other kind of line image that you have, because I can take that lid out and go all the way up through that slotted system that we have on the Stamparatus. There's no other stamping platform out there that can do this, and I love that about it. Now, we are using a slimline panel, so I have a little trick for you here to get the top of this panel done. When you get to the end up here, just hold it really steady and it works really well. So in order to get the top of the panel, I can't actually measure that and be as consistent, so I'm going to align it where the last stamp was, go to the next to the last hole, and I'm going to pick that stamp up and then put it in the last hole and make that stamp. Ta-da! All done. Same pattern, same consistency. Wipe everything down, and I'm going to go to my next sentiment, and I'm going to put it exactly where I want it, and then I'm going to do the same thing all over again with all of my words, and I'm going to have that same consistent pattern all over again. Now, you might be wondering, how come I didn't just stamp all of my words all at the same time up my panel and just do it all at the same time? Because there is a little bit too much extra stuff around the photopolymer, is a little bit too much around the words themselves for me able to butt them up enough to get the words close enough together how I needed them. That's the only reason I didn't do them all at once. I couldn't get my words close enough together to be able to do it together. That's it. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I would have. But I did the same thing over and over. I'm using vanilla cardstock, very vanilla cardstock here, and I'm just doing the same technique. And sorry, my head got in the way there for a second. Put that in the very last, the next to the last hole, pick up your sentiment and then put it in the last one, and then your placement will be exact on that last one. So I am using Blushing Bride here on our very vanilla cardstock, and I'm just going to finish this up, and I want y'all to see the whole entire process so you can see how easy it is to finish off a panel. This is a slimline card panel, and it does measure 3 3/4 by 8.5, and I'm just going to play a little music while I finish this up. Now we're going to go ahead and stamp our love and always sentiments. Don't forget that when you are using embossing powder, that you need to use an anti-static powder tool. That's going to keep the embossing powder from sticking in places that you don't want it to stick to. Even like the oils from your fingers, embossing powder is going to stick to that. And that anti-static powder tool is going to keep that powder from sticking to places it shouldn't, and keep your embossing powder, your embossing looking pretty. Even see that little place over there on the side, that embossing anti-static powder tool is going to keep it from sticking to those places. Make sure that your heat tool is nice and hot before you take it to your paper. It's going to keep the paper warping at a minimum. I don't care what kind of paper you use, it's going to warp a little bit. Heat paper, it's going to warp just a little bit. That's fine. I use a coffee filter to catch my embossing powder. It's just a whole lot easier that way. If I found that if I use paper, it's going to stick to it and I'll lose some embossing powder. So I use a coffee filter and I use it over and over. I just shake it off over the trash can. Next, we're going to go ahead and stamp our flower on our background piece here. I'm actually going to trim down this background piece a little bit. Off camera, you're not going to see that part, but I trim about 1/4 of an inch off of it, top and bottom. So it's about 1/8 of an inch off of either side. Then I'm going to take our coordinating dies here and I'm going to use some washi tape to hold these in place and die cut our Love and Always. At the end, I'm also going to go ahead and die cut the Love and Always out of some pink cardstock and stack that under both of those, just to give them a little bit more heft and also make them stand out against the background a little bit more. It kind of gives it a little bit of shadow without giving it a shadow. I'm going to punch out of the scalloped heart punch, and this is Sahara Sand, Blushing Bride, and Rococo Rose. And then out of the solid heart, I'm going to use the coordinating DSP, and this is the foiled, and I'm going to do that out of all 3 of the foiled paper pack here. And I'm just using the solid heart, and I'm going to use some Mono Multi to glue those together and stack those up on the coordinating solid color. This die is a border die, and it is from the Floral Hearts die set. And it has these teeny tiny little hearts and teeny tiny little dots in it. And I'm going to layer that on our background. That's Daisy, and she is saying hello to everyone. Now this is a lot of paper layers going in a whole lot of the same colors. To make everything kind of stand out a little bit, you want to do a little bit of inking in some different places with a color that isn't included in this grouping of colors. So I'm going to layer all these paper pieces together for our hearts. And then I'm going to grab a blending brush and some ink, and then also a fingertip dauber and some ink. And I'm going to ink the edge of our stamped panel over there in some Blushing Bride first. And then I'm going to take a fingertip dauber and some early espresso ink and do the very, very, very edge of that, and also the die border that we die cut. And that is going to actually make this stand out from the background and not just kind of look like a floaty piece. It does add a little bit of authenticity to the piece. It adds a little bit of depth to the piece, and it just adds a little something extra to it. It adds a little bit of antiqueness almost to it, because this piece just kind of looks like an older card to me as I got it together. So and I'm not putting this on the panel, on the top of the panel, it's going on the very, very edge of it. And once it goes down onto the pink panel that's going to cover our card base, you'll actually really see how this stands out. I'm also, like I said, going to do the very bottom edge of the die cut piece for the border that we did as well. And it really makes the edge of that Sahara Sand stand out on the background. And if you didn't do that, it would kind of blend in a little too much. You could have, of course, done that in a pink or a different color, or even a metallic cardstock if you wanted to, or a glitter cardstock. But I wanted to keep the focus on the words on this, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So we're going to stack everything together here and glue some things down flat, and we're going to pop some things up with some foam tape. I do recommend that you have a couple of different levels of foam tape. Foam tape comes in a couple of different thicknesses. And Stampin' Up, you have your dimensionals, and then you have your foam tape strips and your sheet foam tape. And you can either stack foam tape together and make your different levels, or you can purchase different thicknesses of foam tape. That's entirely up to you how you do that. And I'm using some thinner foam tape here that I had on hand, just because that was what I have on hand. And I'm going to put just a little bit of foam tape on the back side of these hearts and pop those up. And then I'm also going to put some foam tape behind different areas on our words over there, because I'm going to put glue behind the areas that sit on top of the hearts, and then foam tape behind the areas that don't sit on top of the hearts. I'm also going to heat emboss the word that's included in the stamp set, the word "you," on pink cardstock, and place that as well. I started with the center heart, so I knew where to place my other 2 hearts first, and that's going to be it. I'm going to use some Nuvo drops in Antique Rose, just to give a little pops of color on different areas of my card here as well. And that's going to be it, and that's going to finish off our card. Thanks so much for joining us today. Don't forget to head over to Make the Cards Challenge and join us for our sketch challenge this week. And thanks so much for joining me. All the products that are used today are listed below in the description and over on the blog. Thank you again, and y'all have a great day.